Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I am so very happy to be here with you today. I'm ready to continue our study of this book in our book club, right? And I wanted to take this opportunity to talk a little bit about the book itself. So before I move on, I just want to say that it's important for us to understand that as we go through chapter after chapter, we are today on chapter 18th of this book, Wake Up and Be Happy. Um, we we pause to come to this reminder that this is only our first book that we read, we study as part of this book club series, right? But in fact, this is not the first or second. This is the eighth of a series that is quite long, and this psychological series by spiritual author Joanna de Angelis is truly inspirational. And it's truly inspiration for our organization. I'm talking about the Solitude Center for Spiritual Living. And we selected this particular book for the book club this year, 2022. Understanding that the psychological series in general, in this book in particular, they have this goal to provoke reflections about ourselves and look into our problems, our conflicts, our challenges, and our shadow, right? That area of ourselves that really bruise all the complexities and nuances that make us who we are. So, as we go through this book club series, I find in particular this book, chapter after chapter, the messages found here are very powerful to me. They're very impactful. So, hope to see you week after week with me and that you have an opportunity to read the book and let me know if you agree with our interpretation and the text of the message. So, as we keep going here, I wanted to say that this chapter, chapter 18, is all about love. And specifically, as you see here with the subtopics, it's love, but also forgiveness and service. Joanna de Angelis brings those three elements as key ingredients for us to attain self-realization, the title of the chapter. So let's go over together in the next few minutes and let's go to the next slide. Just a visual for us to look at it. So we start the chapter and it's all about love, the definition of love. Joanna begins by telling us that love is the nourishment that sustains life. I love that concept. It is the nourishment that sustains life. And she goes on to say, without it, life would be a phenomenon that is vegetative in its nature. To me, the word that comes to mind is just robotic, right? We wake up, we spend our lives, and there is really no psychological or even existential meaning without love proper. She, Joanna, adds some attributes of love that I wanted to share with you. She talks about forgiveness in service, but she also mentions the genuine nature of love, and as such, that genuine nature of love is one as a feeling, right? As a sentiment, as from within to outward, It is a form of, using her words, of radiating life, radiating light, right? So when we love, we are full of light. We radiate that feeling, and with it, all around, inside of me, but all around me, and of course those who are the object of our love, there's no room for feelings of resentment, oh, aggravation, bitterness, anything. When I love, I simply love. So many of us talk about love is blind, isn't it? And I think about it, that word, with the sense that no, not really. Love is there's no need to be blind, because you don't see, there's no need to look at those things. They're just absent in that relationship. So with forgiveness, Joanna talks about, as we love, um, forgiveness is a misnomer in the equation of love, because actually there is no room for forgiveness, because there's no room for taking offense, to feel attacked by, say, someone's aggressive behavior, or how people treat us, or how people treat other people. We don't get to get upset. So it's a very interesting. You love in that genuine love. You shed light with everything, and you don't get offended. Therefore, there's no reason for even have a need for forgiving. But she brings something else, the counterpoint to that, which is service. And to me, service, to serve, is a execution, if you will, and I hope I'm using the right word here, but the implementation of that feeling. It's the action of loving. So, service, she says, is actually the goal, the ultimate goal of loving, is to become selfless, right? So, instead of being self centered, and it's all about me, when I love, I radiate love, and it goes from inward feeling outward, in that selfless act, right? And in doing so, she brings us to this concept that we do become co creators of peace, of goodness, and actually progress in our community, in our society, in our country, culture, in whatever component that we're part of. We are that agent for progress, evolution, growth. So, with love, life is full of joy. Life is full of progress. Life is full of a sense of gratitude. Life is good. Hmm. Is there a problem with that? Well, the problem is that our lens regarding love is a lens that is way too often a material one, right? We do live, we are immersed in that material existence on earth. And as such, in our present state of imperfection, it's almost impossible for us to really give that definition of love as we live it. So even if we think, like, let's be very academic here, even if we think about defining love itself as a word, we come across this word that has multiple meanings, right? One word, multiple meanings. What do we mean by that? Well, we can simply say there is filial love, the love from a child to his or her parents, maternal, paternal love, sexual love, erotic love, possessive love, right? Platonic love. Do you see that just by giving adjective modifiers to the word love, we start to see different definition in our, in our own sense of interpretation that kind of changing slightly what do you expect from that feeling. So the multiple meanings of the word makes it almost, and I'm saying from me to you, right? Almost impossible for us to say love is so and so. According to the Bible, and I love that, we come, and this is from John chapter 1 and verse 18. John simply says, God is love. Therefore, love, and this is our interpretation, right? Love is absolutely transcendental in its essence. And I would like to stick with that. But before we move to Joanna's discussions on forgiveness and service, maybe we can take a pause to talk about that perspective. And the perspective is truly Western culture, right? Western civilization. If we think about where we are immersed today, and I'm speaking from Nashville in the US, right? Uh, Love has the two very strong roots, the Greek roots and Judeo Christian, which is that biblical root of the word. And it's interesting for us to think that from a Greek concept, you start to think about either the Platonic definition or erotic definition. And it's so interesting. And I discussed this a long time ago, but it's important maybe for you to check it out, right? What is the story of Eros? Um, in Greek mythology. Eros is a poor man, but he is quite active. He's quite ingenious. And in his um, own frame of reference, right? His desire to do things, he keeps transcending where he is, his own status, his own environment. He transcends himself through his desire, right? And he does it so much that he's able, and I love this, he's able to transcend the material world, right, to the world of ideas, to the world of truth, of goodness, and all that is beautiful. How about that? And when we read about the eras in from Greek mythology, we have a sense of that he falls into idea of beauty, generation of everything that is beautiful, and as he does that, he he thinks that we can live a life, that material life, that is full of what? Of possessions, what he calls trophies, right? What we call in the mythology trophies, the things that we hold on, that we attach this to mean that. Also, he talks about our life becomes a collection of, and forgive me for saying that, but of waste, of using a more trivial word, right? Of junk. The things that are so precious to us are just that, ephemeral things. Yes, they're material, but it is part of waste, right? So, what in the myth of Eros, this Greek mythology of platonic love and erotic love, they talk about something that's quite interesting, which is the sense that we live in the world of satisfying our ideals, our desires, right? Our aspirations. And we also live in a world that we are very familiar with our own sense of imperfection. But in the awareness of our own imperfection, there's a drive to overcome them. So while we live in a world that can be our choice to be a world of appearances and illusions, right? And most of us are still there. We desire something, but it's an illusory, right? It's often we put that mask that Gustav Jung talks about, the mask of happiness, but oh, we're far from it. So we become an actor of a world of appearance and illusions, but in our state of awareness of our own imperfection and what we're doing, we can really progressively look for ways to become authentic, to become genuine, and to reach true ideas. So, in other words, this is what we are immersed in our culture, and just to remind us that the Greek concept of love is based on, yes, that the world is eternal. There's no beginning or end, but that love implies knowledge, and knowledge implies love. Love it. The Judeo-Christian concepts of love, it tells us that, well, love is not born out of mankind, right? It is not born out of this world. It is simply born out of God. It is part of the divine, and it requires for us to reach true state of love, this state of transcendence. So in a way, the Greek and the Judeo-Christian, in my own way of interpret, all push for that idea of overcoming and transcending who we are to be able to truly love. Okay. So, from that perspective, bringing down to the chapter that we're talking about, and narrowing to what Joanna tells us, we come to the idea that there are several types of love, and the more materially attached we are, the more selfish our love is. And think in terms of I love you, my wife, my husband, my brother, my child, whatever. There's an extreme sense of ownership, of attachment, right? It's a selfish love. You're mine. And the caution for all of us is whenever we live a love, we experience a love that is so selfish and so possessive that may lead to some sort of violence. And we can even extrapolate, right? It's not people that I love, but maybe I love my country, and in the love of my country, if it's so selfish, I don't know, uh, uh, experience the feelings of xenophobia, right? Or experience the feelings of I want to protect, therefore I'm going to kill anyone that threatens my country. Similarly, we can talk about perhaps ideology, right? I love this whatever, this philosophy, this religion, this body of work, whatever that contains your sense of knowledge and the identity, and you love it so fiercely, you're so loyal to it, that in the materialization of that selfish love, you end up become intolerant, inflexible. So you see that there is a component here that is very important for us to understand when we talk about our own imperfect nature and how our love, such a pure feeling, can lead to that selfishness if it's my possessive. It identifies who I am. But then there are other types of love, right? For example, rational love, and I always talk about rational love as those of serving, but it's based on a reasoning, if even if it hurts. And maybe some examples of that could be, Gandhi, Mahatma Gandhi, that rationally he pursued nonviolence, and he would rationalize his love, and in it he of course freed an entire country, in this case India. Or we can talk about Martin Luther King, or my goodness, my favorite Nelson Mandela, where in a country immersed in a history of so much hatred, separation, etc., he chose love as the element for leadership, right? And the last one, just because of brevity of time, we think of Jesus as an example of giving love, right? And Joanna tells us Christ, Jesus Christ, is indeed the model of love, right? Who was Jesus according to Spiritism? He was, simply put, the most enlightened spirit to ever walk on earth. And in he's this highest form of pure spirit in our realm, this dimension, this earth that we inhabit. He, Jesus, gave us examples of how to love. And I'm going to say love correctly, right? How to love without the intricacies of what we experience as part of the culture that we're immersed on. So quickly going over Jesus' life, we can just begin with the fact that even though he was such a highest, purest form of a living being on earth, what does he do? He is, as an adult, baptized. He there is no sense of humiliation. He was humble in receiving that baptism from John, his cousin at the time, right? It was an act of obedience and an act of love. He also, on a different front, right, in terms of obedience, but also understand the law of man. He was born, and his life, his teachings often clashed with the Roman power, right? The Roman uh, empire and its ruling over the Jews. And he did that without disobeying the law of the state, right? And a good example that we most of us remember is when he said, right, give to Caesar what is Caesar, and to God what is God's. But I love, as we're talking about Jesus and John the Baptist and John, the Apostle John, right, when he says God is love, I like to remind all of us, and including myself, a phrase, a sentence given to us by St. Augustine. And St. Augustine said, love and do what you thou wilt, right? Love and do what thou wilt. Okay, St. Augustine, Marcia, can you break this down? And he simply says, if you shut up for love. If you speak, speak out of love. If you correct out of love. And if you forgive, forgive for love. This is quite amazing, and it actually gets me all emotional, because St. Augustine reminds us with such a quick sentences, right, that love must be at the center of all of our actions, right? So we can break it down further by saying that when we, when we relate with our neighbors or right anyone in our lives, oh, our family members, our friends, our co-workers, even those that either are not part of life that we don't care or we really don't like it, we must do so. We must relate to each and every one of them in a climate of respect, in a climate of support, of help, of collaboration, of cooperation. So, just to wrap up the thought process, Allan Kardec in the Gospel according to Spiritism taught us that love is just a synopsis, a summary of what the doctrine of Jesus was. So he really tells us that we should learn how to love, but understand that loving is an inalienable feeling that is part of this heritage that we have as immortal spirits. So it is through this purest feeling that we have inside of us that we can reach ever wider horizons on the path of our spiritual evolution. Gorgeous, right? I love it. So let's move on because I only have a few more minutes to wrap it up today. And just real quickly, we get to learn that um, to achieve self-realization, right? We do so with those teachings that Jesus gave to us. So the proposition that he brought to us more than about roughly 2,000 years ago is to simply love. Love always, right? So the imperative to you, to me, to all of us is to love. But Joanna tells us wait. Important to know the imperative to love does not say that the imperative is for you to be loved. And this is important for us because we're always, this is our condition of imperfect spirits, I guess, but we do and we expect a return. And she says, no one ever said that you must be loved. We stop as we must love, which to me, in my mind's eye, there's that sense that love as a feeling radiates from inside outward, right? What you get in return, it will come naturally. You don't have to worry about it. But Jesus always taught us about forgiveness, and he with his teachings, there is really no escaping that sense of forgiveness. And as the slide says here, any attempt to suppress forgiveness results in self punishment because resentment, hatred, and a desire for vengeance become implacable enemies for those who harbor them. So it's important that we forgive, but if we don't forgive, we suppress forgiveness, we're going to live in that, immersed in those feelings that are actually not good for us at all. So to finalize, and I may be a few minutes late today because we are right at 29 minutes mark, but we reached the notion, the third notion, right? Love, forgive, and serve. And serve is given to us the fact that it's impossible for one to be in a state of peace if one is not serving. Well, Why or why not, right? Well, the act of service, we are taught, is an act of love, and an act that vitalizes us. It promotes anyone in their time of need, right? And you serve the other, yet that action is not transactional because it is not receive any form of compensation. And by that, I mean no financial compensation, but no reciprocal favor, or even if you serve because, right, because I will have a personal interest, because it's going to make me look good, because it doesn't matter. If you serve out of love, it's a true, genuine act of service. And one point that I would be remiss if I didn't bring to all of us here is the fact that while we're learning, right, we're learning about our spiritual dimension, we're learning the material lens of love, we learn about the spiritual dimension of detachment. We who are students are first learning about our own spirituality, right? And we start to confront, but I am an immortal spirit. I do not want to have any sense of attachment, right? We try, and this is common, we switch, if you will, our lens into a sense of, I don't want to be a part of a material world. I want to do anything, including how I relate to things and people, and I try to escape my own material dimension, right? I deny who I am. So Joanna tells us, and this is really an alert. Joanna tells us that this approach actually does not deal with our end goal, right? Our end goal is to be perfectly happy, to be that angel like state of self illumination. But in order to develop ourselves into that perfect happiness, in order to execute on the immense potential that exists inside of us, in order for us to connect with the divine, the mechanism, easy, right? Easy mechanism, easy things that we should remember. We must love, we must forgive, and we must serve. So, in conclusion, and I say this is truly my concluding thought processes, we need to remember that when we practice love, we love, remember, St. Augustine, right? When we practice love, we should love with everything and everyone, everything that we do. So when we do that, we're able to feel love more intensely. Remember, you don't need to, I want to be loved, because you're already feeling love, and you feel extremely intensely because you are it. And you're able to forgive without any question because you don't feel attacked. And you're able to understand the motivations of the others. And we can even imagine our day to day, right? When we think and speak with love. And when we do that, we're somehow predisposed to be kind. So it is your thoughts of love, your words of love, your actions, your acts of kindness of love. And we're also able to understand all of those around us, and even those that supposedly we can label them as our adversary, our opponent, our enemy, anyone who's blocking our desire to progress, right? But we see them not as the other, the enemy, but simply a person like you and me who is actually going through dealing with their own inner conflicts. They may be even sick. And by sick, I'm talking about emotionally sick, psychologically sick, physically sick, and they may not even know about it. So when we love all of those, and most especially those that are not well. When we're able to forgive, right? All of those, I call it blocking us, challenge us, creating difficulties and problems to us. We are able to collaborate to the goodness that exists, and the goodness, this abstract concept. And as such, we enter in this different domain that is a domain of service, a domain of solidarity, a domain of actually constructively doing something, supporting the other, and in the process, growing spiritually. So, Joanna closes the chapter with a very few words to us, and she says we are not to remove ourselves ever from the obligation to love, to forgive, and to serve if we want to attain that state of self realization. So, with that, I want to say thank you. Thank you for your time today. Thank you for spending this past 35 minutes with me. And we shall continue our discussion next week with the chapter 19, Providential Forgetfulness. See you then. Bye bye.